Welcome to Season 4, Episode number 27 of the Outlap F1 Podcast. It's our Austrian 2022 Grand Prix race review, and as always, we are proud members of the Ship It Studios Podcast Network. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Deanna tonight. It is our podcast version 2.0 formation. Dee, it's been a couple weeks. You've been doing some traveling, but how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It feels like it's been a minute since I've done this, but happy to be back. And this is now 2 great races in a row. So very happy with that.
Yeah, you picked a good time to plug back into it.
Yes.
That's definitely for sure. You can find our show on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast. See our link tree. If you're on YouTube, please do us a solid and click that like and subscribe button. Or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, and Lord knows we're on pretty much all of them. And if you find one that we're not on, let us know and we'll find a way to get on it. Click that 5-star button. It just helps us get more content to you that much quicker. You can email our show at chatnow@outlapf1.com. You can peruse our website at www.outlapf1.com. Just as a reminder, if you are new to the sport of Formula One, and boy, have you picked a great time to get involved with the sport, we have stuff for you. We have perfect content for you. It is our F1 for Beginners. There's a series about it on YouTube, but there's also our Season 4, Episode 4, where we read you in soup to nuts and have you talking like an expert by the end of that episode. So if you want to learn all about the insider knowledge of what we're talking about, that would be a good place to start. Thank you, as always, to our members of the Outlap F1 Nation, including recent new contributor Dean Warwick, along with Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, Mary Brown, Jonathan Scott, and he's still enjoying his summer break, Matt Polanski from the Red Sector MotoGP podcast. If you'd like to become a member of the Outlap F1 Nation, please feel free to check out our link in our show notes, and any sort of monetary amount would be greatly appreciated, $1, $5, whatever you'd like to do. We put it all back into the show. It's so we can be on recording platforms like this and buy the equipment that we use in order to make the show better. We hope, if you've been with us from the beginning, I hope you've seen the improvements, and that's what we continue to try to do. All right, please check out our link in our show notes for that. As a reminder, we still are able to provide you with the code OUTLAP with the good folks from Manscaped. Please feel free to check out the 20% off and free shipping that comes with that. James is not here to model it, but if he was, he'd probably be wearing the Scuderia is Back shirt from the F1Guy.com. That is our friend Vincenzo Landino, his shirt line. They are awesome shirts. Please feel free to check those out. Just as another reminder, we have one of our more recent sponsors is Athletic Greens. Please feel free to check them out, athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's www.athleticgreens.com/emerging for, as James would say, some delicious and nutritious morning nutrition to help you get your day started right. And our other sponsor this week, it's nice we have all these sponsors. This is a great thing to have, is the Portage Park Development Project. They are a thriving community in the Upland Metaverse. And if you're from Chicago, Portage Park might sound familiar. That's because the Upland Metaverse is based on real-world cities and properties, and Portage Park is an actual neighborhood here in Chicago. The Metaverse of Portage Park is the most developed neighborhood in Upland, with over 700 supportive members and property owners enjoying competitions, community initiatives, and local shops with a monthly town hall meetings to connect with your fellow Uplanders. And now racing has come to Upland. Portage Park are developing a racing team to fight for the top step of the podium. We have a training academy for drivers and racetracks in development, making the most of our shops and local attractions. We want to show the best that Portage Park has to offer. Come join us. Links to the Portage Park Discord server, racing track maps, and socials are now in our podcast show notes. We hope to see you in the metaverse. All right, now that we've gotten all of the particulars out of the way, have to be a little bit heavy before we dive into what was a very, very fun race. And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight when we get into all that. We do have to talk about some of the reported fan behavior that was observed and reported to both the race promoter and Formula One at the Austrian Grand Prix, not only today, but over the course of the weekend. F1 has issued the following statement, quote, we have been made aware of reports that some fans have been subject to completely unacceptable comments by others at the event. We have raised this with the promoter, and security will be speaking to those who have reported these incidents and are taking this very seriously. This kind of behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated, and all fans should be treated with respect. I can just go on to say I've read some of the reports. They're not exactly a fun read. So I put out a tweet earlier today, and I retweeted what those people were reporting, and our statement is as follows. Fan behavior, as outlined below, is absolutely reprehensible and should not be tolerated, full stop. We cannot aspire to call ourselves an inclusive sport if this is allowed to continue. Dee, I know you've probably seen some of the reports. What's your take on what we've seen?
I mean, it's awful. It's deplorable. You have to hope somebody at the Red Bull Ring, hopefully there's some reports and some action actually being taken on this. It's awful to hear. These people just want to be at the track and enjoy the race and just have a great time. And the fact that these people are just destroying it for everybody and kind of ruining the kind of community feel that these races can have. It's really sad to see and watch it. And hopefully there are consequences for these people because it's awful and it's not anything we want anywhere near F1.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like heated rivalries here in the States, and one that I can think of is just as a local, Chicago Cubs versus Chicago White Sox. This was two fan bases who don't necessarily like each other in the same city, and when the teams would play each other, the first couple rounds, Deanna, I will give you an equivalent. Think of Duke, North Carolina, but out in the hot sun with 40,000 people.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine that type of rivalry and heat in it. Basically, what came out of those, I mean, it used to be epic fights, especially up in the upper decks. And what happened was both Wrigley Field and Sox Park established these text lines that are used to report anonymously any sort of troublesome behavior. I know at Sox Park, it's you use, I think it's called a hashtag Rise Above. And all you have to do, you don't even have to text it. You just have to send a DM to the White Sox with that and a section and a row number, and someone's going to come and investigate it. And what they do is they take whoever the suspect is out, they do their investigation. Maybe the person can come back if it's not true. But most times that person is gone from the venue. They make kind of a, big show of force in order to do that. But that's how you almost have to root this stuff out, because I don't know that you're ever going to stamp it out. But, the fans who are guilty, they're ejected. And look, we're in the data era now of digital ticketing. So everybody knows who's buying what from whom and when. So finding people and identifying those people is a lot easier. I mean, I can remember a couple years ago, there was a Cub fan who used what was called the upside down OK sign, which apparently on some 4chan, board got turned into a racial thing. And he tried to sneak that in right, ironically enough, behind an African-American presenter. So yeah, he got booted and he got banned from basically all baseball stadiums for the rest of his life. So, I mean, that's how you're going to do this. I can think of Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, where they literally have the court in the basement of the stadium. So you are arrested, tried, charged, and convicted before halftime. That's how bad, and Philadelphia's a rabid fan base, and they've not had the world's best reputation. But that's what places can do to try to root this stuff out. Basically, you got to prove that it's the authorities and the security that are running the show, not the crowds, is what looked like to be the case this weekend.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I think that's it. Hopefully we can get more positive from here. But thoughts go out to the people that were affected by that.
Really absolutely. I mean, you make the effort to make a trip and go to a race. Nobody deserves that. I don't care.
No.
That is not appropriate. So, and we will support whatever efforts these places take to stamp it out.
Absolutely.
All right. Now we can move into hopefully a better part of the weekend. We will start with our headline of the day. Dee, kick us off. What's your thought?
New regs on old tracks is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. This is 2 races in a row now where we've had just excellent racing from start to finish. just groups of like 5 cars battling for the same piece of track. And it's been so fun to watch. And I think this is kind of what we wanted out of these regs. So it's really kind of starting to come to fruition here, which is just fantastic to see.
Yeah, I'm right with you. My headline, quote from good old movie, "Are you not entertained?" To quote one of our frequent contributors, this race had everything. It had close, tight racing. It has strategy decisions. It's got some reliability woes and a finish that kept you guessing. You had to watch this race all the way till the very last lap. And when can you always say that about an F1 race? So just for all of that, this thing was amazing. And we're going to get all into it in just a little bit. James, who's not here, he is coming back, or I think he's still somewhere out in the hinterlands of Michigan. But his headline, as he was able to get some cell signal and send us a message, is the Austrian GP, where I can be excited, worried, and stressed the fuck out all in the same race. And if you're a Ferrari fan, as James is, I think that's accurate. All right. So what feels like 4 weeks ago now, with the actual qualifying that happened on Friday. And with the sprint format, it really does make the qualifying feel a long time ago. So let's get into it here. All right. In that session, going out in P20 was Sebastian Vettel. P19 was Nicholas Latifi. P18 was Joe Granu. P17 was Lance Stroll. P16, first of the painful McLaren news, was Daniel Ricciardo. The other painful McLaren news was his teammate didn't fare that much better. That would be P15 with Lando Norris. P14 was Yuki Tsunoda. P13 was Sergio Perez. He had some interesting post-qualifying penalties applied, which put it back down there. P12 was Valtteri Bottas. P11, Alex Albon. Advancing into the Q3 top 10 shootout in P10 was Pierre Gasly. P9 was Lewis Hamilton, as he had an off, didn't set a competitive lap time. P8 was Fernando Alonso. P7 was Mick Schumacher. P6, Kevin Magnussen, in very impressive showings for the Haas team. P5 was Esteban Ocon. P4 was George Russell, before he had an off in qualifying as well. P3 was Carlos Sainz. P2 was Charles Leclerc. And in P1, with a lap time of 104.984, was Max Verstappen. I know it's a while ago, but Dee, what's your thoughts on the qualifying session?
I think the biggest news coming out of that has to be Mercedes, and both of their drivers giving their mechanics a very, very big job that night, and very much props to those mechanics for getting both of those cars out for the sprint race the next day. It was pretty wild. I think we really haven't seen major mistakes from Hamilton or Russell, not like that, kind of out on their own. So to watch that happen probably within about 5 minutes of like actual track time of each other was pretty wild to see. And I'm sure there was a lot of banging on the table for Toto Wolff.
Yeah, if you're Toto Wolff, that's it's bad enough to watch one, then go through a red flag, then you get going. Hey, we still got one more shot, and oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was painful. For my team, who I support, the Friday, I'm just gonna call this really, very simple. The very, very, very awful bad day. Between the practices where both drivers didn't get a run on the soft tire, to the qualifying where Lando's brakes were failing and Daniel couldn't get out of Q1. Just a ridiculously rough start to the weekend. The two Mercedes going out, Haas showing very well, I thought was interesting. And it was an interesting final battle, actually, in Q3 between Leclerc and Verstappen. Leclerc actually went P1, and then Verstappen pipped it back at the end. Not a whole lot of margin in terms of the lap time. So, you could tell that it looked like there was a fight brewing as we move. Then, of course, from Friday into the Saturday sprint. And a bit of drama pre-race. Fernando Alonso did not get the tire warmers off. Therefore, he had to start from the pit lane, and as it turned out, his car would not fire. So therefore, he ended up with a DNS and basically went all the way to the back. P19 in the sprint turned out to be Sebastian Vettel. He went off with about, 2 laps to go and fell to the back of the field. P18 was Nicholas Latifi. P17, Yuki Tsunoda. P16, Alex Albon. P15, Pierre Gasly. P14 in the sprint was Joe Granu. P13 was Lance Stroll. P12 was Daniel Ricciardo. P11 was Lando Norris. P10, Valtteri Bottas, although he would end up going to the back with a whole bunch of engine penalties. P9, Mick Schumacher. P8, who he held up for a long time in the sprint, was Lewis Hamilton. P7, Kevin Magnussen. P6, Esteban Ocon. P5, hard-charging Sergio Perez all the way from P13. P4 was George Russell. P3 was Carlos Sainz. P2 was Charles Leclerc. And scoring what turned out to be pretty significant 8 points in the sprint was Max Verstappen. Thoughts on the sprint?
I have a few. I think, first of all, shout out to Mick Schumacher. We'll talk about him more in the race, but I think after Silverstone last weekend, yes, he scores first points, but I think we had 5 or 6 DNFs, so it was a little bit of, was that just chaos or was that kind of real? But it really does seem like it lit this fire under him. And so I know he was upset with the team. He wanted to get past K-Mag. They didn't let him pass. He thinks that he could have challenged even all the way up to Ocon in 6th, but he had a great battle defending from Hamilton. I think Hamilton did, though, have a bit of damage that he picked up from a collision with Gasly at the beginning. Gasly also loves a first lap incident during a sprint race. And then, but it was just fun to see that defending and just kind of a little bit of shades of his dad. And it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a confidence thing. You know, you get the monkey off your back, you get those first points, regardless of how you get them. Sometimes it's just a matter of just the psychology of having that off your shoulders. And look what he's able to do. We've said a few times, if the car was there, we'd love to see what he could do. This was a very fun battle. If you're a Hamilton fan, you're probably a little frustrated to see it, but again, just appreciate it for what it was. It was a fun battle between the Haas and the Mercedes there. So that was interesting to watch. The big winner of the sprint's got to be Sergio Perez. Like I said, starting from P13, we'll talk about when we get to awards, the FIA and the lovely penalties that were applied. And there were lots of them this weekend. So they were definitely a story as the weekend continued. But to come back, made good use of the sprint. My 2 McLaren boys got a little bit closer to where they basically probably should have been, at least in terms of qualifying pace. So P12 and P11 for them. Ferrari continuing. I'm surprised. The only thing that surprised me, just looking back on the weekend, or now that we've seen the race as it played out, I'm surprised Leclerc didn't try to push more in the sprint as it turned out. It just made me wonder what they were doing.
I think a little bit of that was Ferrari. I do think they really need to, they have internally committed to Leclerc. I think they need to do that more so, just be like Sainz maybe next year, but like right now sit in second. Because it was fun to watch Sainz come after Leclerc in those opening laps, but Leclerc finished 1.7 behind Verstappen. Maybe that's where that time was him kind of battling with his teammate in an effort that didn't result in anything for Sainz anyway. So I think they kind of stumbled over each other there for a couple laps where Leclerc could have been focused on Verstappen and maybe picked up that extra point there. I think that was a little bit of kind of Ferrari politics. Kind of, they don't know what to do or manage drivers, but
yeah. We James and I talked about it last week that now we're seeing that what we thought was going to happen was this 2-headed monster shows up. They're both hard-charging, want-to-win now guys. Yeah. Both kind of at the same kind of career arcs in their respective career, and both think they can challenge. So
at some point, those two cars are double DNF is coming. I feel it.
Yeah. Well, maybe after today, the Sainz train might not have as much behind it, particularly given what happened today. But it looks like at some point. One of them is going to break rule 1. Yeah. Because there's only so much that it seems the engineers are willing to do or not do. We'll have to see. We'll follow that. We'll have to see how that goes throughout the course of the rest of the season. So I just put in the show doc here. Thoughts on the sprint for winners. We talked about that. Thoughts on the sprint for losers. Big loser was Fernando Alonso, not being able to start, not being able to get the equipment off in time, some sort of electrical issue. And then Sebastian Vettel, obviously spinning out and not finishing the sprint leads to some problems.
I think Albon understeered into him in his slight defense. Albon had a bit of an adventurous day as well.
Yeah, I mean, he had the 5-second penalty because, according to the stewards, he pushed Lando off. You know, I've been the rubbing is racing guy. I got to be consistent here. If I didn't think it was a penalty in Silverstone, I'm not going to think it's a penalty here. So I thought it was fine.
I think the Vettel one was more egregious than the Norris one, which made no sense.
Yeah, because that's after the corner.
Yeah.
When you're going into the corner, I think it's okay if you're on the inside to cover the other guy off or make it difficult for him on the outside. And Lando was trying to make a pass on the outside, and that's hard to pull off. So, so I got it. I definitely got it. So, just because we're here and because it's the sprint weekend, we kind of don't know what to get by now. But we've seen this now. This is the fifth or sixth time we've done this. Any thoughts? Any new thoughts on the format or anything we haven't necessarily said before?
Not really. I don't hate it, but it's not like I'm like dying to see this. I think out in Imola, I think that sprint race was better, but that led to a more boring race. I think this sprint race was a little less exciting, and I was nervous that it was going to lead, like the actual race was going to be worse than that, even though we ended up getting a really, really good spot. And I think a lot of the people that were out of place kind of got themselves back up into normal position anyway, and we still had a good race. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it. I think Imola was just a horrible choice too for to have a sprint race, kind of over long term. So I think they really need to think about the tracks in the future. I don't know. It's fine. I don't hate it. It's more time, cars on track. It's not the most productive use of time either, but I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, I mean, other than the Friday qualifying and me selfishly going, God, I really wish it wasn't right at 10 a.m. on a Friday. That's a hard ask if you have any sort of a paying job that you'd like to keep and be good at.
Yep.
But other than that, I mean, I'm fine, I guess, with the format. You know, it's if you have a bad Friday, you're going to have a really bad qualifying. There's really not a whole lot you can really do about it. Because you only have a couple hours to get the car set up right. So I think that creates some randomness to it. I do think this sprint kind of reset a lot of where the grid should have been.
Yep.
Like if qualifying would have gone according to the normal, this is probably a grid you probably would have seen, particularly because, I mean, even in the qualifying session, I mean, we had both Mercedes go off. So them being out of place was not horribly, abnormal. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm okay with it. I mean, this venue at least met my criteria, which is a really strong fan base that's active in it. That's true. The ability to overtake, and you want to get the most out of the 3 days. So yeah, I mean, for this one, I was nervous about this one too because I didn't think it made sense because the qualifying here is usually really fun anyway. Mm-hmm. But it worked. So I guess I'm no more in or out of the sprint format, I guess, than I was when I started.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. We shall turn the page, and now we will get into what feels like a long time ago, even though it was just this morning, Sunday, and the race. We will start with our back markers. Leading the charge in that, he did not have a particularly good race day. That would be Sergio Perez. He finishes in P20. He did not finish. P19 turns out to be Nicholas Latifi in the Williams. He also did not finish. We will talk about the fate of Carlos Sainz. He finishes in P17 after his engine blew up in epic fashion on him. I think it was on lap 46 or 47 or something like that. He, therefore, did not finish. The first of the finishers was actually Sebastian Vettel, finishing in P17. P16 was Yuki Tsunoda. P15, Pierre Gasly. P14 was Zhou Guanyu. And in P13 was Lance Stroll. Both Aston Martins still in the back markers, not out of Q1. Don't think we're going to get any of those protests anytime soon from Christian Horner because the green Red Bull ain't like the blue Red Bull, at least in terms of pace.
Yep. Yeah, what a horrible, horrible weekend for Sebastian Vettel. Some of it, I think, mostly not his fault. I think he had the Albon incident in the sprint race, ended up in the back. Then he had the incident with Gasly. Gasly got a penalty for that as well. So yeah, I think he just kind of had a real tough weekend, mostly not his own fault. Also got a fine for leaving the driver's briefing.
That had to be one of the more. Okay, I love this sport because it still presents me. I've been watching these things for like 20 years of my life. And this is a new one that I've never seen in a steward's notice, where you were required to report to the stewards for conduct unbecoming in the driver's meeting, which made me wonder, what the heck did he say that enabled people to get that pissed off? But he was basically given, I think it was a suspended $25,000 fine, which is effectively a slap on the wrist, and it told, don't cause a ruckus. I guess his complaint was, from what I read, primarily about the fact that we've had some inconsistencies in the decisions, shocking, and inconsistency in the race direction, also shocking. None of this, I think, is new. It's interesting that it took Vettel to bring them out. I've since read a statement from George Russell, who's actually the president of the GPDA, who's kind of said the same thing, that said, hey, we're just looking for consistency here. We'll talk about, the 5-second penalties and, the penalties for taking people off. But you compare this to Great Britain, I understand the argument. It's not the same rule book, it looks like.
Nope. And, we'll talk about this, I think, a bit more later. We got a lot of weird penalties and things coming from the FIA. I don't know if this kind of new regime is just stamping their authority or what it is. But it's bizarre what they're taking issue with. And I think, yes, raising the problems with the stewards that we can all clearly see, I don't think that should be kind of out of line. But anyway, so eventful weekend for Vettel. Yeah,
definitely. I guess we'll talk about poor Carlos. He looked like it was on for a Ferrari 1-2. Strategy had seemed to work out. They looked like they had the pace on the Red Bulls. And then Carlos signs his engine while, believe it or not, the race direction actually had his onboard on the camera, decides to go pop, going into turn 4. Bit of a scary moment, actually, as it turned out to be, because he stops the car. He's up on a hill. There's no handbrakes in these cars. So what does the car start to do once he takes his foot off the brake? Is it starts to roll backwards, which is away from where his help is. And oh, by the way, the car is now on fire. And it was not a small fire. No. It was a big fire that looked very scary. And there's one shot of him halfway out the car. He'd obviously gotten the straps and stuff off, reaching for somebody to help pull him out, and you didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
So, then the shot goes then to Mattia and the Ferrari pit wall, and I'm like, what are you doing to us here? Come on. We want to make sure Carlos is okay. Fortunately, it looked like he was able to hop out. They did get the fire out. Basically, next time you saw the car, you saw the fire out. So, but just an odd, huge engine failure. You usually don't see them that epic, but that one certainly takes the cake for one in a while.
That was a very dramatic failure, and I think this is kind of one of the worst, marshalling responses that we've seen in a while. Because he stopped, and a marshal ran over. He had a fire extinguisher. He put the fire extinguisher on the ground, and then turned around and ran back to do something else. It was happening in the background, and it was I don't know. I feel like the priority should have just been let's just get this fire. It was going up quick. It was going up quick, and he was trying to put the wedge in. Honestly, it's just run down the hill with the fire extinguisher at that point.
The wedge in the tire was not a good idea. Yeah. That was one of those. And talking about analysis paralysis, maybe that's our clubhouse leader at this point is the marshal who decided the wedge versus putting fire out.
Yep.
But luckily, Carlos was no worse for the wear. But it now probably seals whatever championship challenge you'd think he would have had or was bubbling up, especially after the race in Great Britain. That looks to put the kibosh on it. I think Crofty mentioned that was the 4th mechanical failure.
Yep.
Either a spin or something like that for him this season. So, yikes. That's a lot to overcome.
I also feel like this is a good point or time to bring up thoughts on them not throwing a full safety car.
Yeah, it was surprising. I expected to see a full safety car. Yeah. Now, they did, the second the vehicle goes on track, throw the virtual safety car, which at least nullifies the race. Yes, it was offline. Yes, it was at the end of the gravel trap. But, we've seen weird stuff happen before. I was really surprised we didn't see a full safety car. And I didn't know what we were trying to preserve, what gaps, at that point, it shouldn't be about whatever the gaps are. It should be about what's the safest action.
Yep.
And the safest action in that case, with a car on fire, for me would have been bunch the pack up, get them out of the way, maybe even throw a red flag if you had to, if the situation deteriorated.
Yep.
Luckily it didn't. But that was surprising. What was your take on it?
I just get the feeling that after last year, like it felt like it was kind of all high drama all the time. And I think they're trying to 180 that and do VSC and have as little interaction in the actual race as possible. But I feel like we can find a middle ground. And they love to throw a VSC and then wait an incredibly long time for a safety car and incidents where it does seem obvious that there should be a safety car. And I don't know. I feel like we can find a middle ground that's not like the crazy decisions Massey made versus just the kind of, we have all these incidents, we're cleaning them up, we're only throwing VSCs. That also has felt wrong in some moments as well. So, and also who doesn't love a little bit of drama? I mean, I wouldn't hate safety cars.
No, I mean, in this race would have actually really, it may have changed the outcome. I don't know. I think Leclerc probably had the pace on Verstappen anyway, even with that, but it would have thrown the midfield into a cataclysm, I'll tell you that.
And we could have gotten like the restart in Silverstone. That was absolutely crazy and amazing and fantastic. And yes, if we had an opportunity to get that again. So I'm a little bit sad we got deprived, but.
Well, and not only that, but you would have had a hell of a lot less lapped cars. I mean, the pace difference between Leclerc and the rest of the field, I think he lapped all the way up to P6.
Yeah.
I think, what was it? Yeah. Or P5 even.
Ocon
was the only, the last finisher on the lead lap, and that's in P5.
And I think he unlapped himself, ironically enough.
Right.
Without collision this time.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, Verstappen and Leclerc, they finished 41 seconds up the road from Hamilton. Like, they were just...
Yeah. They were off in a league of their own today. But yeah, all right. So moving on, we will now move into our midfield, where there was lots of spicy battles up through the midfield. P12 was Alex Albon. P11 was Valtteri Bottas. P10 was Fernando Alonso. He was investigated post-race, but was ultimately cleared. I don't know how much play that's had, so I want to make sure that he was cleared of an unsafe release there and was able to keep P10. P9 was Daniel Ricciardo. P8, Kevin Magnussen. P7, Lando Norris. P6, career best finish for him, Mick Schumacher in the Haas. P5 was Esteban Ocon, and he's back in the top 5 yet again. P4, George Russell in the Mercedes, overcoming 5-second penalty and a whole lot of traffic to get that P4. So thoughts on the midfield?
I feel like probably starting with Alonso, who had one of the more eventful days of everybody. Starting 19th back of the grid with Bottas in the pit lane, and somehow worked his way all the way up to, I think it as high as 5th at one point, maybe it was 6th at the time, before Sainz retired. Got overtaken by his teammate, but really he would have finished 6th had his team not screwed up whatever this pit stop situation was, and he pitted twice under that VSC. But yeah, very, very eventful day. Kind of went all the way up and down the field multiple times.
Well, he was in trouble. He had to make that second stop because they went hard, which I don't know made sense. I think he came in. Yep. I think he started on the hard tires. I think they put him on a hard tire again, which means you've now committed him to a 2-stopper. Where he might, I don't know if the mediums would have lasted all the way to the end. I mean, it looked like this place seemed to be much more of a tire killer. Could have had something to do with the massive rain shower this morning that washed all the rubber off.
Yep.
But, what was believed by Pirelli to be a 1-stopper was anything but. You saw 2 and 3 stoppers throughout the field. And yeah, it came down to, I guess, his second stop. He was feeling some sort of a vibration right away. They pitted him again. He kind of lucked into that virtual safety car, which basically saved it, because if he had to pit again, he would have fallen him probably all the way to the back.
But anyway, team squandered that situation, and they just Alpine. I mean, this is definitely the best entire weekend I think they've had in a while. It did not look good after the sprint, with Alonso not even starting. Ocon stopped on track after the last lap, one more lap, and he would have. Imagine if they didn't have that extra warm-up lap. I don't know if he would have made it. So, I mean, Ocon, I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, but had a good weekend. But Alonso yeah, it was really good until it wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, the Alpine one lap pace since that upgrade package has come in has been really good.
Yeah.
It's just, can they get their cars to the end? And I think they've just gone, it looks like their development program has been just go out for pure pace. If it blows up, it blows up. Yep. And we just pick up the pieces and move on. But they are right on McLaren's tail. In fact, they are tied with the 4P4 with McLaren on 81 points. McLaren did show some fight back throughout this weekend. I was impressed with that. Both Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris getting in the points. Some really nice scraps with Lando and Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher. And at one point, I think it was Fernando Alonso, and there was the gaggle of 5 cars that all went into one corner, and we had that yet again. Put that in my veins and just let's go. I mean, it was harrowing to watch, when you have a driver you're rooting for in there, but amazing car control by all 5 guys. And it was, for the most part, a really clean overtake, and overtaking maneuvers. There wasn't a lot of forcing off the track or track limit issues. Lando ended up overcoming a 5-second penalty as he went off the track 3 times, and looked like he maybe could have gotten Mick Schumacher near the end, but looked like it was the front battle between Verstappen and Leclerc got in the way of that. So there was no coming together at the end there, but good rally for McLaren after the awful Friday to get double points. I think was good, and Haas F1. 2 weeks in a row, double points. Go Team USA. A-OK.
Yeah. And for the first time, they had an actually good qualifying that turned into an actually good race result. And it being kind of an extended race weekend with the sprint in the middle. Very impressive. Very good to see. Schumacher, P6, I mean, has really just easily the best weekend of his career. And the first time he kind of looked legitimately on pace, if not better than K-Mag, obviously finished ahead of him. So yeah, that was awesome. It was a great weekend from him. And yeah, it was just lovely. And now we can hopefully, this momentum continues and we don't have to ask those questions anymore. Because I think the last time, a couple of races ago, we were really starting to ask questions.
Yeah, I think the temperature under his bottom in the car, unless it's the engine overheating, has hopefully gone down quite a bit for him. I thought just his racecraft was on really good form these last couple of weeks. And now you're beginning to see, you can take, I think last year and almost throw it out. It was basically a how to be an F1 driver, 101 course where you're not really competing with anybody else. This is at least now we've seen when the car is reliable, and we can talk a little bit about Kevin Magnussen. He was lucky to finish. He was complaining of some engine grumbles himself. So Ferrari power units in Austria did not exactly go well together today, but he was able to finish. It is a double points finish for Haas. They tend to go really well here historically. So, this is one of those venues where they can make some hay, and good on them for doing it. And Mick Schumacher, like I said, great result for Mick Schumacher, his best of his career. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine doing a job. Again, I keep saying, there was nothing like spectacular about anything that he did other than he was there. He was on pace. He stayed on the lead lap. He unlapped himself, as you said. And once again, George Russell, the little guy that just keeps going, and that Mercedes is looking better and better. And he just, came up through the field. You had the 5-second penalty and overcame it. So, there were lots of guys who overcame these 5-second penalties. So, very impressive showing, I thought, from him.
Yeah. And I think, I don't love the 5-second penalty that Russell got. I think there was kind of plenty of room for Perez, and it was one of those kind of first lap things. And it was very much earlier in the corner than like the, what was the other one that happened?
The Albon Vettel one?
Yeah, or Gasly Vettel, one of those two.
Yeah, or Gasly Vettel.
So I didn't love that, and then he took that penalty pretty early, all the way down to 19th, and then recovered up in 4th. I think had he not had that, probably would have had that podium instead of Hamilton, because he took that penalty. I think he ended up about 15 seconds behind, and you got to think it's 5 seconds plus being in a crap ton of traffic as well. So I think he'd be pretty close, if not on the podium, had it not been for that. But again, I mean, this is every single race he finished. We can just kind of ignore Silverstone. finishing in the top 5, and it's lovely. And he's really just been incredibly impressive this season, I think, so far.
And for a team that, you look at them and you go, they're struggling, and woe is woe at Mercedes land. Look at the points they racked up. As we move into the podium, P3, Lewis Hamilton, P4, George Russell, P2, Max Verstappen, and taking the win was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. But just to touch on Hamilton, I mean, again, he had himself a pretty eventful race coming up from P8 and finishing P3.
Yep. And my last point on Russell really quick. Well, both of those cars are basically duct taped together, but Russell running a bigger wing because that's all they had left too. So he was also dealing with that hindrance as well. But then, Hamilton coming from P8. Also, he got overtaken by Schumacher, even though we didn't see it. But then he had probably one of the overtakes on the season back on Schumacher later in the race, kind of hanging it out around some of those corners through the middle section there, I think. What is called the toboggan run. Yeah. So that was awesome. One of the highlights of the day for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis still has, I think, the overtaking gene in him. Mm-hmm. It was nice for it to come out. That was a very amazing overtake. I completely agree there. And then moving into the top 2, the ding-dong battle between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. Looked like Max got him off the line. You thought he was just going to sail away and we were going to have a 2-3 second difference. Oh, no. Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari, the engines may blow up occasionally, but when they work, they have some pace.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I think what's interesting is being able to see what makes the sprint race, I think, kind of interesting is looking at just the slight changes of weather, just it being that bit cooler, having the rain, and how much that did affect the Red Bull's pace compared to the Ferrari. And I think it has been a nagging issue for Red Bull, kind of tire wear and tire dead compared to the Ferraris as well. So just kind of being able to see the difference and that shift from one day to the next is kind of cool. So I'll give that to the sprint race. But yeah, I think Max tried everything he could, but that Ferrari was just overtook him 3 times. And that first one by Charles Leclerc was just beautiful. Came out of nowhere, caught Max off guard. The other 2 are much, much simpler, but yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first one that I don't think anybody saw coming. Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, we're 9 or 10 laps in, and all of a sudden he's in the DRS, and we're like, whoa, where did that come from? And it was a complete surprise move. Max was totally on the back foot, did not see it coming, could not do any of his defensive techniques that he's tried to patent over the years now. That wasn't available at all because Leclerc was already by him by the time he figured out what the heck was going on. And yeah, I mean, every time Red Bull tried to throw the dice down and try some undercut strategy, Ferrari just covered them off. It was going to be a 1-2 if it wasn't for the Sainz blow up. But Leclerc had the mark of Verstappen the entirety of the race, it seemed, once he got past early on. So very deserving win. The only negative, I think, if you're a Ferrari fan, is he only pulls back because of the sprint and the way all that works. I think he only pulls back like 5 points on Verstappen. So he's still 38 down, but it's gone from like 48 a couple races ago down to 38. We've already seen a 43-point swing in this championship once. There's nothing to say. If this pace is real and now Red Bull's on the back foot a little bit, there's no reason if the Ferrari can keep it on the track that they can't get back into this.
Yep.
All right. And from our resident Ferrari expert who is not here, James has chimed in with his kind of thoughts on the Ferrari weekend. And his thoughts are, will there ever be a nice, easy win to enjoy? Even when they are the class of the field when it comes to pace, they manage to have one engine completely blow and then Leclerc's throttle. We didn't even talk about this. Issues to make the last 10 laps way, way more stressful than necessary. Shout out to the strategy team this weekend. Charles knew they had the race pace and a handle on the tires going into Sunday if they could only make the car reliable. Yeah, we hadn't talked about the last couple laps were filled with drama. Leclerc was on the radio complaining that his throttle pedal was sticking to the floor. He was basically scooping it back up with his foot in order to bring it back up to prevent, and then that even led to, I think the gearbox wasn't in taking the downshifts. It got a lot closer. It only finished by about 1.5 seconds, the final delta. it was about 3.5 before all that stuff started. So if Max had maybe another lap or two, maybe this is a different result.
Yep. And that just makes the end of this race so much fun, and all the stress and the drama. Anyway, it was a fantastic race, and impressive for Charles to kind of keep it together, because I think he had a good 6 or 7 laps at the end dealing with that. So yeah, props to him, because I can't imagine having a throttle stuck open is a comfortable feeling.
Especially with all the straights.
Yes.
I mean, there's straights, and then they're almost in the 90-degree corners. So, I mean, imagine that's the last thing you want to have happen is your throttle sticking. So, but yeah, kudos that he was able to manage it. Whatever they told him to do, he was able to do. He got the car across the line. My only advice, you do get to do the weave thing when you're like 5-6 seconds up. Don't do that when you're less than 2 seconds up, because at some point somebody's going to pip you doing that. Yeah. So I understand wanting to celebrate with your team, but get across the line and then do all that stuff.
At some point, we're going to get like the people that are like running into the end zone, but like drop it right before the line.
Right.
Something like that's going to happen.
Exactly. All right. So, yeah, I think this was an amazing fun. There were battles throughout Austrian Grand Prix. We're going to take a quick break. We'll get into where the points and everything are. We'll get into your reaction on the fan email segment, and we'll get into our awards and all that other good stuff. So come on back, and we'll get into it. Welcome back to Season 4, episode number 27 of the Outlap F1 podcast. We're proud members of the Ship It Studios podcast network, and this is our 2022 Austrian Grand Prix race review. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Deanna tonight, and we just wrapped up talking about this amazing fun race. So, Dee, where do we sit at the driver standings now?
Yes, so Max Verstappen is still leading the championship on 208 points, and behind him is Charles Leclerc, slightly closing to 170, 38 points behind. In third is Sergio Perez on 151 points. In fourth is Sainz on 133, and had Sainz finished this race, they would actually be tied at this point. But sadly, that Ferrari engine blew up. And in fifth is George Russell on 128, with his teammate Hamilton behind on 109. In seventh is Norris with 64. Eighth is Ocon with 52. Ninth is Bottas with 46. And in 10th is Alonso with 29.
In our updated team standings, it's gotten a little bit closer at the top, but it is still Red Bull out in front on 359 points. Second is Ferrari on 303. Third, they're still not having that bad of a year. That's Mercedes on 237, even with all the woes. Look where they're at. P4, McLaren on 81, tied for P4 with Alpine on 81. P6 is Alfa Romeo on 51 points. P7 now up one spot, Haas Ferrari on 34 points. P8 is AlphaTauri, and they are on 27. P9 is Aston Martin on 18. And in P10, still with those 3 points, is Williams Mercedes. All right, so that enough of our takes. Now we open it up to the floor and get your takes on this amazing race. It's our fan email segment. Deanna, as James would say, it's your time to shine. Here we go.
All right, so starting with Rachel Fleming, 2 points to ask. More Mick Schumacher points, his best weekend yet in F1. Does this run form almost certainly mean he's keeping his F1 seat, not necessarily at Haas? And my second point is, we all know, okay, it's not confirmed, that Latifi is on his way out, but could we see a somewhat mass exodus of F1 drivers with Tsunoda dropped, Ricciardo retiring or dropped, and Vettel retiring? I can see all 4 drivers gone at the end of the year. So let's start with Schumacher. We kind of talked about that at the beginning. We think he obviously will stay at Haas next year. We think it's a lot more deserved, I think, than we would have said a couple races ago. I don't think Ferrari is on the table, but any thoughts on that one? If it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, it makes more of a case for Ferrari later on in life, but not necessarily today. I mean, Ferrari is thrilled with their driver lineup, at least what they have right now. Sainz is on a contract. They just renewed that. So there's, the only other viable place to put him would be Alfa Romeo, and Haas is doing better right now than Alfa Romeo is. So I would think that they should probably keep him right where they're at. The heat under the seat now has, I think, been extinguished. And if he can put together a decent second half of the season, it's only going to add to his CV, which already, has some impressive background in it before he got to F1. I think it just takes time for you to become a viable F1 driver. Everyone expects people coming in from F2 just to hop in and be okay. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I mean, we've had some exceptions to that. We have some amazing people who had some amazing rookie drives, but it's a hard thing to do. And I think it just took him a little while. But if this is the form that he can put together for the rest of this year, it's going to be darn impressive. So let's see what he can do.
Yep. And then, so on the second point, she believes we might see 4 drivers out, and that would be Latifi, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, and Vettel. I'm kind of Latifi, I think, is the most guaranteed, probably replaced by Piastri. I would say second most likely, I would say Vettel retiring because that Aston Martin, it hasn't seemed like the best year. Any thoughts on that one?
And that's going to be up to him. I mean, I don't think the team wants Vettel gone. That's Vettel if he decides he doesn't want to be part of the long-term project, because I think it's going to be a long-term project over at Aston Martin.
Yeah.
The Ricciardo story. I mean, I've talked about Daniel Ricciardo. It just, even Ted Kravitz in his notebook even brought up, especially like after Q1 when he's just like, you're out in P16 and he's just, okay, understood. It's just hard. I get it if it's not working. It would suck not to have him on the grid in some form next year, but it may just be time. And, he still had a really impressive run when he was here. Unfortunately, it's just not working out with him in the McLaren car. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Yeah, I don't think, unless something happens in the next 5 to 6 races, I do think the sun's setting on that one, because this year has just been, you look at all the other drivers that switched last year. You have Sainz, which, he's had a couple struggles, but definitely he just won a race. Russell's only been there half a year and is doing incredible things at Mercedes. Even Vettel, he's definitely leading that team. I can't say that they're really having a great time back there. But yeah, and there's just you can look up and down the grid and it's just, he's just struggling compared to everybody else in all these new teams. So it's just, and there's so much young talent waiting in the wings.
Especially in the McLaren camp. The story came out late today. Colton Hurd is going to test the McLaren car at Portimao, I think tomorrow.
Yep.
He's going to pilot the 21 car, the MC35M, or the MCL 35M is what they call it. And getting familiar with F1 hardware, he's waiting in the wings. He's got a McLaren contract. McLaren is going to be interesting in how they want to figure out their drivers, because they signed, Rosenquist and IndyCar to this really kind of weird deal where you're in our camp, but we can put you really wherever the heck we want you, and you really can't say anything about it type of contract. So if that's how this is going to play, I can't tell you what I think the hot rumor is. The rumor going around the paddock this weekend was that somehow they were going to try to pit Piastri off of Williams and potentially put him in there. I don't think they want to go 2 young guys. I think if they're going to go 2 young guys, I think Colton Hurd is more viable than Piastri at this point.
I don't know. I definitely want Piastri to have a seat as well. I definitely have Colton Hurd. But if Piastri does get pipped, I still think we'll get an American driver. I think that then nicely slots in Logan Sargent over at Williams. Would be my guess. But yeah, I don't at this point, unless something happens, which we saw everything turn around for Mick the past couple races. So maybe something happens for Ricciardo and we all just suddenly forget and the skies open up and it's sunny and lovely. I don't know, but at the moment it doesn't feel good. And yeah, they're very much courting a bunch of people, a bunch of their young drivers. And then the 4th person on this list is Tsunoda. Any thoughts on that one?
James and I talked about it a little bit in the preview. I still think he's fast. I'm not ready to get. I know the Red Bull policy is you either make it or you're gone type of deal, and I don't particularly love that because I don't think we should just give up on him yet. I think it's that AlphaTauri car. To have a guy as talented as Gasly struggling as much as he is this year tells me it's not just the drivers. That car is not working well, and I think Franz Tost would be the first guy to admit it. And I think Tsunoda has some development to do. Yeah, sure, but I don't want to see him out of the car. And I don't know who's the next in the Red Bull Academy that blows your socks off.
Yeah.
Richard Verschoor. in F2? I mean, maybe, but I don't see it. I don't see anybody doing any better or any worse than Yuki Tsunoda right now in that car.
Yep. I don't think there's anybody, in F2 that I'm dying to see in that car. They're dying to see in that car. He has some great moments as well, and then it kind of drops off. I do think there's a lot of issues with that AlphaTauri just to begin with. I mean, the only way I could see him being replaced is if, for whatever reason, kind of Red Bull breaks mold and they go out and they get another driver like a Piastri or something like that, and just kind of slot somebody completely new in there. But I feel like at this rate, that's definitely the safest one on that list of four to me. And then after that, I don't think there's really anybody up and down the grid that I would see leaving, except for maybe a surprise Hamilton retirement, but I really doubt it at this point.
No, I mean, I think most of the rest of the grid is locked up on contracts that have multiple years on them. I mean, that was the whole point of the craziness in the last couple of years, was to try to get all that settled when we went into these new regs. So, yeah, but I mean, the silly season will still be the silly season. I guarantee you, by the time we get back from the summer break, something will happen.
Something's going to go crazy. Yep.
We'll be there to talk about it. That's what we do.
For sure. So next up, Dave Doherty says, your thoughts on Ferrari's race and Mick Schumacher's weekend. I think we've talked a lot about both of those, but any last comments on those?
Yeah, I mean, if Ferrari can at least be fast, there's nothing to say that they can't get back into this championship. Verstappen is not unbeatable. I think this race proved that. He's not, that half a second or quarter second ahead of really Ferrari on pace. Ferrari just has to keep the damn cars on the track. You keep them together long enough to actually finish the dang races, and they're okay and not get in their own way. Those are the big issues I have with Ferrari. And this is what we talked about a long time ago. Way back in our predictions, we said Ferrari was going to be the new kid on the block, and were they ready to fight in this arena? Parts of it tell me yes, and there are other parts of it that tell me maybe not yet.
I think the one positive from this weekend, on the actual race itself, Ferrari actually executed a strategy well. I was a little nervous that they were going to kind of leave either Sainz or Leclerc out there to try a one-stop with Verstappen catching, but they were proactive. They put both of their cars behind Verstappen and let them go and catch him, knowing that they would have the better pace. So that was just good to see them being proactive, even though we were on plan E or whatever was going on over there. I don't know why that was so low down the docket, but so I think that
always makes me wonder what the heck was in plans A through D.
Yes, because it seemed like a very somewhat normal strategy, but okay. Sure, Ferrari. As long as we get there, I guess that's the moral of the story. All right, so our final fan email is from East Coast Shark Stan. It says, 1, happy for Leclerc. He looked super fast and very happy. He has a great race to hopefully build off of. 2, gutted for Carlos. Second time this year, Ferrari in a great position. Has the car absolutely crap out on it. The other being Leclerc, a mile ahead of everyone else in Barcelona. Hopefully he bounces back in France. 3, feel equally bad for Checo. Russell did him dirty in turn 4, in my opinion. And finally, 4, McLaren and Alpine tied halfway through the season. Should be exciting to see who finished 4th. Thoughts on who that will be. I think for the first point, we talked about Leclerc. 2, we are also gutted for Carlos and Ferrari's reliability. 3,
my bet with James is now in the bin now.
It's gone. 3, any thoughts on the Checo Russell incident? I think I said my thoughts earlier, but
yeah, I mean, I think it was lap 1. I don't like it when I hear, and even the guys I root for do it. They all do it. Like, there's anything close to anything on a track, and somebody's going to get on the radio and start the hoping of trying to get somebody a penalty. I believe in general that the FIA that governs the least in terms of that kind of stuff will govern the best, because the only stuff that will get penalized is the stuff that's egregious. And that's what those provisions, I think, are there to help stop. Plus, we're actually in the entertainment business, and we like to see cars kind of close to each other. And if we keep putting all these 5-second penalties in, nobody will go for those gaps. So we're sending, I think, a bad message by doing that. So, I was not thrilled with a penalty there either.
And we had such an enjoyable, wonderful weekend with things not being policed that much in Silverstone, and now we have to be annoyed by this weekend. Last week was much better on the stewarding side. And then finally, McLaren and Alpine tied halfway through the season. I really think it's going to be Alpine in the end. I think Alpine should be way ahead. They just cannot get through a weekend clean, the 2 cars. But I think that the Alpine at the moment is the 4th quickest car.
Yeah, I mean, the problem that McLaren faces is I don't think they're going to have any huge more rounds of upgrades. They're not planning a whole much more than what the car already has. And I think the issue with that car is you don't know what it's going to do when they show up to a weekend. They show up in Britain and they look good and they look like they could be the fourth fastest car. They show up here and they look god awful. And, it's only one position different, but it feels so different throughout the whole course of the weekend. And Alpine's basically giving it to them. You're keeping them in it because, if Alonso's where he was supposed to be and Ocon's where he's supposed to be, this isn't even a contest really at this point. So I think it's almost strategic by McLaren at this point just to let this one go. They're going to try. It doesn't mean that they're not going to show up to the weekend and not try, but I think Alpine looks quicker for me, and that's a tough thing for me to say as a McLaren fan.
Agreed.
All right. So we will get into our awards. And as we are apt to do, we'll start with our rubbish. And I will read James's first because his is the shortest one in all of the document here. And that is his rubbish goes out to the Ferrari power unit. I understand why. Ferrari loves to make things difficult on themselves, as well as he's giving a bonus shout out to the Mercedes team for being awful at pit stops. He loves to see that, I think it was a 4 or 5 second stop today. So Deanna, what's your rubbish thought?
I'm going to agree where you're going here in a second, but just to keep it light at the moment, I kind of have a lot of different options. I think Gasly had a pretty disastrous day. Track limits, kind of taking Vettel out. And then I think he got investigated for not serving the penalty and just trying to rack up every penalty point he could today. And it was awful. The podium graphic that had Perez in first.
Everybody mismatched.
And Verstappen in third at Mercedes. And I don't even know what was going on there. The Ferrari engine blowing up, literally exploding. And even K-Mag thinking his was about to go too. F1 TV really ruined my data screen and it made my viewing experience not as easy as it normally is. And I really hate that data screen. It's making me very angry. TV direction, especially those opening laps. We had Schumacher passing Hamilton, didn't see it. We had Norris or Ricciardo, one of the two. McLaren's overtaking each other, didn't see it. Just really poorly timed replays. Just drive me nuts. And anyway, and then I'll get to the FIA and stewarding here in a second.
Yeah. So mine is, and we talked about it first thing in the show, and I think it's a product of what's happened over the course of, I'd say, maybe the last 18 months of the fan bases, and that's just the discourse between fans and certain fan bases. It just seems that we're not getting any better at it. It just seems it's going lower and lower, and that just makes me sad as a fan because this is an amazing sport. It's got the power to unify. I'm sitting in this chair because of its power to unify. I found some amazing people on here because of this sometimes silly, strange. We probably take it all way too freaking serious, but it's still an awesome sport, and I still love watching it. And I hear that music, and it doesn't matter what my mood is, and it just puts me back in the right spot. You can support Lewis, you can support Max. I don't really care. But the state of play between these two fan bases is absolutely atrocious right now. And it's exhausting as kind of a relative neutral to try to stay out of the firing line about what you say and how you say it and how it's taken and who's going to take what the wrong way and who's going to get inadvertently hurt by being a critic. If you say Max screwed up by going off the track, somebody's going to get offended by that. And if you say Lewis is showing his age, somebody's going to get offended by that too. So it doesn't have to be like this. I saw especially some awful instances. And here's the other part of it. With social media and everything, you don't know what's true. It wasn't that I wasn't disgusted by what I was reading earlier in the weekend. I don't know if that's somebody trying to bait somebody into stuff because I've seen that too. And that's just as stupid and dumb. So however we have to get out, we got to find a way out of this. I don't know how we do it. I think it's one at a time, slowly but surely. But if you're a Max fan or you're a Lewis fan, find somebody on the other side and just say hi to them. Try to make a friend here or there. I've got friends on both sides of this. It's possible. It's perfectly fine. So we can all get back to coming together and enjoying what is really turning out to be not a bad looking season whatsoever. There's amazing talent up and down this grid. We don't have to do this type of stuff. It just makes me sad. All right. I'm done ranting. Now we're going to get into John's rubbish. This is what he wanted to say about it, so I'm just going to read it for what it is. And his rubbish goes out to, I think, along the same lines as me, but fan behavior. Absolutely disgusting that he's calling it this shit is happening. Growing up around rivalries such as Bears-Packers or Carolina-Duke, I'm used to heated fan bases, but there's also a mutual respect between the teams and the fans that we know that the rival doesn't really exist without them. What happened this weekend is beyond measure. Hearing reports of particularly people of color were wearing or those wearing Lewis Hamilton gear being targeted is one of the lowest of lows in the sport. Unfortunately, when a team who is now the face of the sport calls for murder charges after a wreck, accuses another driver of doping, refuses to publicly take a stand against racist and homophobic remarks directed at one particular driver, I'm not shocked at what happened today. F1 has allowed this BS where you can say or accuse anyone you want of something publicly without any repercussions to go on far, far, far too long. It has fueled this disgusting behavior. Well, I'm confident that it's a small percentage of the fans that are responsible for the vileness and the vile behavior. I do unfortunately believe that this activity has been fueled by the direct actions within a particular team's relationship that has gone unchecked. It's time for F1 to wake the F up and get control of their house. All right. Big time rubbish.
Yep.
From all of us, I think, this weekend. And this wasn't a race we enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yo, imagine what happens when the race is boring. If you think this is spicy, look out. All right, next award. The analysis paralysis. I'll go first with this one. So I don't really have any huge contenders for the analysis paralysis. So I'm just going to go target the broad spectrum of the FIA, and particularly one of the most strange rulings regarding track limits in Sergio Perez that I've ever seen, where after he goes into Q3, he finishes the round, then they decided, in Q2 you went over track limits, and you don't really have a defense for it. So we're going to delete not only all your Q3 times, but one of the Q2 times as well. But we're not going to give you your tires back, and you get to start the sprint on P13. It may be the right call as to the letter of the law, but is this track limits thing fun for anybody? I mean, are we enjoying watching two strikes in the race? I mean, we saw it in F3, we saw it in F2, we saw it in F1. At least it was consistent throughout, but is this fun? I mean, I'm not enjoying it. I don't think, again, like I said before, the FIA that governs least is probably going to govern best. And it just seems they want to keep putting their noses in some strange places. All right, Deanna, what's your analysis paralysis?
Yeah, so continuing on, I'm going with the FIA. A lot of just very strange things that happened this weekend. Bettles, the driver briefing, getting fined for that, leaving early. Basically, half the grid was investigated for conversations on the formation lap in the sprint race, which is also just kind of a dumb rule. Anyway, then you had the podium finishers getting investigated because their physios said something or gave them liquids because they're probably dehydrated after a race before they get weighed. Just the general inconsistency between Silverstone to this race. Then again, that Perez, the track limits one and quali, if you're going to do that, it was very obvious why you let a driver go through and you take the opportunity from another one. I do not know. I think general and track limits during a race, I think at minimum, if you're going to monitor it as strictly as they were, I think you should at least up that amount of times to 5, especially with the bigger wheels and tire covers and all that.
And the fact that the drivers can't see it.
Yes. So I think if you pushed that to at least 5, I think that would have made it a little bit better. Because overall, 13 drivers got black and white flagged, with 4 of those getting penalties, which was just a bit absurd because you had all of this fun stuff going on with all of these, with the strategy and and the midfield battles and all this stuff. And then you throw in all the penalties on top, and there's not really good. It was just random things popping up. You didn't know who had what penalty. And it was just very confusing and just took away, I think, even though it was an amazing race, I had a great time, but I think it could have been that much better without the stewards kind of inserting themselves in literally everything this weekend.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. All right. James's analysis paralysis is for Red Bull strategy. Bringing Max in so early, he truly didn't think, this is James talking now. I truly don't think he had the pace anyway. So going longer probably wouldn't have necessarily changed the result, but he was surprised that Red Bull pulled the trigger as early as they did to get off of maybe their extend or plan A strategy. And John did not submit an analysis paralysis. So we will move on to our dark horse of the day. I think we may have consensus on this one. James and me, and I think John, all have Mick Schumacher in as our dark horse. And if you've been a follower of the show, you know what James necessarily thinks of Mick Schumacher. So I'll read his first. He goes, he's been hard on him, and today's result won't necessarily change that, but it was a hell of a weekend for the kid after lucking into the points last weekend. Well done today. My comment on that is, James, he heard you. He's now building confidence and finding, so hopefully what I think is true form and pace. I honestly hope it continues. It would be great for the sport to have Mick Schumacher contributing to the narrative every weekend. Just good for the kid, good for the name, good for the sport. John's dark horse is also Mick Schumacher. So, Deanna, are you going to make it a clean sweep?
I am, and just ditto to everything you said.
All right. So, moving on to our driver of the day. I'm going to give mine to Charles Leclerc because he took the fight to Max on his effective home track, succeeded, pulled off the on-track overtakes, fended off the gremlins late, and got a win that he really needed to have for his championship. John is going with Charles Leclerc as well. Deanna, what you got for that?
I'm giving a quick honorable mention to Hamilton for yet again sneaking on the podium, and really just for that fun overtake over Schumacher. It was really the highlight of my day. But actually, Leclerc, again, overtaking Verstappen 3 times. Second highlight of the day was that first overtake on Verstappen. And then just managing with the throttle at the end, and it was very impressive all around.
Yeah, and James will probably make this another outlap clean sweep. Charles Leclerc, way to hang in at the end of the deal with a throttle issue to secure his first win from a starting position other than P1, and that is true.
Mm-hmm.
As always, other wins have always been.
Win.
Yep, and hopefully more to come.
Yep.
It certainly looks like it. Like I said, if the Ferraris can keep it on the track, there's nothing to say that this championship can't get a whole lot tighter. All right, turning the page now, and we get into our predictions, and we have been super tight. You, me, and John have been battling it out. But the result this time, John is going to take this one. He ends up with 4 points. He had Max Verstappen on the pole. That is true. He had the best qualifying lap time. He had the sprint race winner as Max. We all tried to hedge and pick Charles. That didn't work out so well for the rest of us. And he had the fastest lap driver with Max Verstappen. I had 2 points. I had the pole sitter and the fastest lap driver. James finishes today with 2 points. He had P1 and P2 on the podium. And Deanna, you have 2 points. You got the pole sitter and the fastest lap time. Market improvement over last week.
Not zero.
So, so our season standings, it is still a 3-horse race. John is now back in front on 28. You and I are tied on 26. James is not that far behind. All he needs to do is nail a podium. If he nails a podium, I think he's back in it on 21. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think another just really great race. And now I am actually excited for France. We did have a great race last year, and now with these new regs, I mean, I'm still going to get dizzy with all the runoffs, but I will try to look past that because I really do have very, very high hopes for this race. And it's fun to actually be excited for the French Grand Prix.
That's true. Believe it or not, we've only got 2 to go until the summer break, which is kind of scary. It's 1 week off, then we head to France, and then I think it's a back-to-back France and Hungary, and then we get to take a bit of a summer break. Before we sign off, I do want to say congratulations once again to our American drivers, in F2 and F3. One, Jack Crawford taking the win in the F3 feature race, which was crazy, but he ended up taking the win. He got screwed over big time in the feature race. He took the win in the sprint race, and got punted off, but he was on for a P4 or P3 finish there. And Logan Sargent, who is now making his case for being the next potential F1 driver. Circumstances fell his way today, but it is back-to-back feature race wins, and he now sits P2 in the F2 championship, and this is his first year in there. So he has found the form. He looked like he was the fastest guy on the whole track today, and he made it work in spite of starting the race on the wrong tire. So that's dang impressive. I was really impressed to watch. It was a fun race. Go watch it if you want to. If you have F1 TV, it's free. Go find the F2 and F3 races this weekend. It is worth your time. So like we said, we've got 2 to go to the summer break. We've got our week off. There was also a whole litany of news. We're not even going to touch that today. We will save that for our next preview episode, which will come probably within about a week to 10 days from now, probably next Wednesday. Not this Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that. And we'll break down, there was an F1 commission meeting. There's Las Vegas has a date. I can break that one. November 18th, 2023. Put it in your calendars now. So a lot of stuff happening. We will be back then to break it all down. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this out. Deanna, anything else you wanted to say before I do that?
No, I think I'm all set.
All right. Sounds good. As always, may all your laps be fast.